I'd like to speak tonight on a subject which is very relevant to our times, the end of the world.
Blessed Seraphim Rose was born into a typical middle-class American family. After high school, he began to search for meaning and truth, and not finding it in the culture and society in which he had been raised, he began to rebel. He had rejected the quote-unquote Christianity of America, which he regarded as worldly, weak, fake. For him, it seemed that they put God in a box. So he turned to the writings of the mad prophet Nietzsche, until his words began to resonate in his soul with infernal power. He then fell into total despair, which he later described as a living hell. He felt that he didn't fit into the modern world, or even into his own family, who didn't understand him. It was as if he was somehow born into the wrong place, wrong time. He loved to roam under the stars, but he felt that there was nothing there to take him in. No God. Nothing. So he started drinking to ease the pain. Eugene began to follow in the footsteps of a man he once met named Jack Kerouac, one of the founders of the Beat Generation. Eugene would get totally drunk and would pound on the floor, screaming at God to leave him alone. Once, while drunk on a mountaintop, he raised his fist to heaven, cursed God, dared him to damn him to hell. If God did damn him to hell, at least then, for that blissful moment, he would feel God's touch, know for sure that he was reachable. In later years, he wrote, "Atheism, true existential atheism, burning with hatred of a seemingly unjust or unmerciful God, is a spiritual state. It is a real attempt to grapple with the true God whose ways are so inexplicable, even to the most believing of men. And it has more than once been known to end in a blinding vision of him whom the real atheist truly seeks. It is Christ who works in these souls. The Antichrist is not to be found in the great deniers, but in the small affirmers, whose Christ is only on the lips." Nietzsche, in calling himself Antichrist, proved thereby his intense hunger for Christ. After graduating from college in Southern California, Eugene started studying under one of the 50s and 60s counterculture founders, Alan Watts, and became a Buddhist bohemian in San Francisco. He became fluent in Chinese in order to study the Tao Te Ching and other ancient Eastern texts in their original language, hoping to tap into the heart of their wisdom. But still, he didn't find the fullness of the truth that he suffered for. He found that the Buddhist nothingness left him empty. Eugene had been seeking the truth with his mind, but it eluded him. In searching through various ancient religious traditions, he once visited an Orthodox Christian church. For years in my studies, I was satisfied with being above all traditions, but somehow faithful to them. When I visited an Orthodox church for the first time, something happened to me that I had not experienced in any Buddhist or other Eastern temple. Something in my heart said that I was home, that my search was over. I didn't really know what this meant. With my exposure to Orthodoxy and to Orthodox people, a new idea began to enter into my awareness. That truth was not just an abstract idea, sought and known by the mind, but was something personal, even a person, sought and loved by the heart. And that is how I met Christ. On becoming an Orthodox Christian, the future Father Seraphim continued to despise the modern world. Hoped for nothing from it. He sought only to escape it. He desired an ascetic faith that didn't seek earthly desires and comforts, but rather redemption through intense sufferings on earth. In his journal, he wrote, "Let us not, who would be Christians, expect anything else from it than to be crucified. And we must be crucified outwardly, in the eyes of the world. For Christ's kingdom is not of this world, and the world cannot bear it, even for a single moment." Sick to the death of the city and the world, him and a friend bought some land in the wilderness of Northern California. They began to live like the desert dwellers of ancient times. There was no running water, no telephone, no electricity. They built the buildings themselves and lived with bears, bats, and rattlesnakes. In 1970, the two friends became monks, thus dying forever to the world. Eugene was given the name of Father Seraphim, after the Russian Saint Seraphim of Sarov. In the wilderness, far away from the tumult of the world, the two friends established the ancient monastic life on American soil. Working by candlelight in his cabin, Father Seraphim wrote many books on the spiritual state of the modern world and translated ancient texts on spiritual life into English. During the communist era, his writings on the state of modern man, the meaning of suffering, and the soul after death had a huge impact on people in Russia, as his writings were secretly translated, hand-typed, and distributed in the underground press. Father Seraphim's message of underground Christianity, of suffering and persecution in this world for the sake of truth, touched a deep chord in the people who were being crucified by the atheistic state. But his message doesn't apply just to them, but gives a devastating blow to those who are satisfied with the world and its institutions. The following is an account by a college student who met Father Seraphim Rose in 1982.
I met Father Seraphim a year and a half before his death. Like him, I'd been seeking reality through Eastern religions, but was reduced to despair. Then one day, Father Seraphim came to the college campus where I was studying. He drove up in an old beat-up pickup truck and emerged with his worn-out black robe, his long hair, and his exceedingly long grey dreaded beard. I found out later that he hadn't taken a shower since the day he became a monk. He was an image of total poverty. The next thing I remember is walking with Father Seraphim through the college. Everyone was staring at him, but he walked through as naturally as if he'd been at home. In the middle of this progressive college, he seemed like someone who just stepped out of the 4th century desert. Father Seraphim went to a lecture room and delivered a talk called
I'd like to speak tonight on a subject which is very relevant to our times, the end of the world. More particularly, signs which are being fulfilled in our times, which point to the end of the world. There have been a number of times in the past when this subject has become very interesting. Actually being called them apocalyptic times. The apostles themselves felt that their times are very apocalyptic. I'll read a little later on some of the statements they make in the scriptures, which show that they really expect.
I could see that he was at least as learned and far more wise than any of my professors. Yet, he was clearly a man of the wilderness. It was only later that I found out that he was at one time a teacher of Chinese at UC Berkeley. What struck me most about Father Seraphim was that he was a man sacrificing himself totally for God. He was not a university professor that made lots of money, nor is he a religious leader that soared off to power. He was just a simple monk who desired the truth above all else. I know that he would die for the truth, for he was dying for it already.
Soon after meeting Father Seraphim, the student joined his brotherhood and became a monk. In the midst of writing and translating books, Father Seraphim suddenly became ill. One evening, after a day of great difficulties, Father Herman went to Father Seraphim. He was sitting down and looked up at his friend. Father Herman began to pour out his heart about how they were killing themselves to spread orthodoxy, and nobody seemed to care. "I have no one to help me," he said, seeing Father Seraphim's sickly state. "And I don't even have you." Father Seraphim lifted his head, whispered, "You'll have me in paradise." His time was at hand. As he lay in a hospital bed in agony, Father Herman asked for his blessing and consent to establish a monastery on St. Herman's Island in Alaska, their lifetime goal. Father Seraphim said in painful joy, "May God bless it." Father Seraphim's lifetime search for truth that began in suffering ended in heaven, which proved to be the beginning of eternal life. Thus concludes a reading from Youth of the Apocalypse. a virtual manifesto for the children of the 11th hour. You can check out the full book in the link below. In the past century, Saint Seraphim of Sarov was an assistant to the suffering and a teacher of orthodoxy in many countries throughout the universe. His teachings and life gives hope to victory on the possibility of reaching the kingdom of heaven. The following are accounts of individuals who reported contact with the saint long after his repose from this earthly life.